Well, for me, the conversations that go best are the ones where they've had some time to think about it and they come back to you and they say, I would like to have a guard, or they just ask some sort of like probing questions like, hey, how is it that you get the potatoes to grow in a container? And like, I'll sort of like dance at that level for a second. And at some point I'll break through and like, all right, are you trying to feed your family? Cause I think we can have a broader conversation about how you structure your dietary needs and then start to like target different levels of caloric output out of the space that you have.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As always, when you hear me start the videos, good afternoon. I'm here with Ice Age Farmer, Christian already. A plethora of information in today's strange world. He and I, we could talk for 16 or 20 hours about the crop losses and the places that are getting cooler than last year and the record snows and blizzards and everything. But this live stream right here today is about bringing you up-to-the-minute information on what we're thinking about in terms of growing. Because wherever you look across the landscape currently, you can go ahead and find an enormous amount of negativity and darkness and scariness and fear across the internet. Turn on anything and you will come across it in about 2 seconds. Well, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the solutions, because as far as I've seen scrolling through, there are some informational bits out there, but I'm hoping that we can put together right now something about agriculture, because it is all about the food. To be able to have some sort of antibody test and then, have that as a passport so you can even enter a supermarket or enter a place that sells food, holds food. That's scary, because they won't let you access the food until you could toe to a few other measures first. So I want to go around that completely. Don't even want to be involved in that system. And I want to know that I am sharing information that I think is valuable and knowledgeable. So Christian, kick it off here, because right before we came on live, that's what we wanted to do tonight, was bring a positive, hopeful message to you for your weekend here to set off the rest of your Friday night, so you can feel good, talk to people in a happy, positive mood, and then move into tomorrow, especially Saturday. You got a full day to do planting, and Sunday, try to roust anybody you can. And hopefully the words we speak tonight will maybe, spur you into action, or maybe you can talk to somebody else and it'll get them active as well by showing, what we're talking about tonight. So Christian, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, David, for having me back. I'm thrilled to be here. And yeah, I'm eager to talk about how we move forward from here. We've been talking about food shortages and the things that have been lying ahead for years now. And so to see it now reported in the mainstream media means we can now go on and talk again. We can look forward at what needs to come next. And so I think when we're in the middle of watching modern agriculture's wholesale demolition and a controlled, deliberate demolition, then it makes sense to think about how we respond intelligently. And clearly, when they're taking away food, when that's the weapon that they've been plotting here, and that's the weapon that communists have used for a long time, right? This is a global Holodomor situation playing out, where they want to starve people out until we submit to a global totalitarian state. And so the weapon, the defense and the weapon, it turns out, against that is a distributed, decentralized model for growing food. If they are ripping down the systems that produce food, and we need to rapidly be standing up new systems, lots of them, that can do the job and as quickly as possible. And that means taking action now. It's not enough to be just aware of what's going on. Consciousness alone isn't going to solve this. It takes action. And so that's why I think we should focus there tonight.
And another thing, we think about farmers market as might being the saving grace as we come into the spring and then the summer. There's going to be an enormous amount of local vegetables. And I think that we're going to be going back to this more and more. And if you learn how to can or how to dry something, especially when it's coming in season, green apples right now for us are in season. So I've been trying dehydrating an enormous amount of those. We were making applesauce. We cooked them down. We made different diffusions out of it. Again, dried slices, whatever. But we've seen in the call by the congressmen and women to make sure that China halts all wet markets. So with the weaponized food, you have to wonder when it's going to come to us, and they're going to say no more farmers markets because you might have mishandled the food. There could be something on the food. It can only go through this process or this agency or this area first, and you have to come to it. There's no more farmers markets. I could already see that as part of the play. So think about the seasonality of foods, because you can barter and trade. And, if apple trees start to go off, you don't have to, there's tons of apples that come out of a tree. So if you're able to get these and then do something with them in season, you can kind of usurp this whole needing to come away from the farmers market. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but
Yeah, and just to be clear, there are already plenty of farmers markets that have been shut down, and farmers who were, there was an LA Times article about a farmer who was planning to take their goods to market. The market was shut down, and they were literally just sitting there in tears. And so this is happening. They are demolishing the routes that farmers and ranchers have had to get them to markets. But that are talked tonight about some of the meat processing plants that have been shutting down, and the way that is systematically being dismantled so that producers don't have any place to take their meat right now. And that ties in, of course, to the all of these agendas: the meatless agenda, the insect protein that was described at great length in last year's UN IPCC food and land use report, where they put out these talking points about, we don't want you to be able to eat meat, we don't want animal agriculture at all, we want to tax food waste like they do in South Korea. And so these things have been sort of tested around the world where they could push the population that far. But right now, in this massive seizure of fear, this huge thing that's playing out around the world, they finally got teeth to push through that agenda. And so we're seeing that.
And I'll add in my 2 cents, I guess. My story of the week would be in the Northeast around Massachusetts up to Maine. They're going to cull 3 million chickens because they can't get the soya meal up there for the food for the animals. And again, we keep seeing this over and over and over and over. The labor shortage, the people that are not there to be able to feed the animals, take care of the animals, pack the animals or the chickens. And they're going to cull approximately 3 million. And that came off AgFacts and one of the news wires as well, AgriCensus. And if they're talking about this many chickens just in a very single small area in the Northeast U.S., you can see it happening across. So that's one. So there's at least a poultry supply that's going to get cut at the knees because some excuse, there goes the food again. We see it again. It's an excuse. Oh, food gone. Excuse, food gone. Here's chickens gone.
Yeah, it's appalling. And we've seen the footage already coming out of those farms. And, we can step back and say that I don't need to support factory farming to know that these are currently the way that a great number of people around the world are being fed. And so there's, I'd love to get rid of those things and replace them, phase them out, right, with a regenerative approach. But you can't just turn off the food system overnight. You lose the entire stability of civilization. And, we talk about those meat packing plants. I was reading today, this is just mind-blowing, that Tyson was actually they were shutting down the Sioux Falls plant and a couple others, and then taking people from those plants that were exposed to infected people and moving them to other plants, which it doesn't take, an infectious disease specialist to realize that they're just moving this exposure from one plant to the next and then shutting that one down too. So you cannot conceive that is anything but a deliberate planned attack to take out our meat processing plant. And that is flowing into the attack on ranchers.
And again, how convenient is the excuse? Well, the meat's now contaminated. It can only go through a new government agency that shall jump up like a spring mushroom in the future. The new, look for it. It'll be beyond the USDA. It'll be its own thing specifically targeted with finding some sort of disease contaminant on top of the meat. But to slow down in the supply chain at that point, or they'll say, we have to destroy everything. We can't really clean it, so it has to be destroyed. So I could see again, this is like the one single excuse that covers everything for centralized control from the farm all the way until the supermarket's controlled by the military here coming up in short order. And it is an agenda, I firmly believe, because how many times can we tick the box of, oh, wait, that fits. Oh, now there's pork's gone. Now the chicken's gone. What's next? The cattle?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been shutting down those processing plants, not altogether, but greatly slowing their rate, saying that we have to distance our workers and take special precautions. And so their capacity to move meat through is greatly diminished. And that means that they've got full weight animals that have to keep being fed. In many cases, you got to think of things as like a production line. And in many cases, if there's a backup here at the processing plants, which are absolutely, I would say, sort of the most critical part. They're sort of where things come together between the producers and then before retail is this critical part. And that's what's shutting down right now. And so the production is still there, but it has no way of getting to the consumers. There's actually the former Secretary of Agriculture, who got his name written down, Tom Vilsack, actually did a CNN. I posted this clip of him interviewing on CNN to my Ice Age Farmer Resources channel, because I keep my channel clear of anything that YouTube could possibly take down. But still, get off YouTube, head over to BitChute. I know we both have channels there. Tom Vilsack, former governor of Iowa, came out and said, we're seeing massive disruptions, and it's a cascading series of events here where, yes, they just shut down schools and restaurants, and then there's dislocations, but that translates then into the processing delays, and that means that and he sort of played out how this happens. And he stopped short of going too far into shortages, but there was a document that actually was leaked from the FEMA DHS virus task force that described at great length the timetable that it would take from as these things grind to a halt, where it's like it's only 2 to 3 days for dairy, and then a couple more days for some of the poultry and eggs, and then a couple weeks you have of fresh vegetables in the pipelines here. And so it looks like if nothing changes over this next, it's a good thing actually that people are taking to the streets right now and protesting this virus, because if nothing had changed, then I think May and June timelines are going to look really rough and uncomfortable in a number of ways. And that's why, coming back to the main point of today, that's why we all have to start growing our own food now, with the focus on things that can help people bridge this gap we're looking at right now.
And with that being said, I would like to hammer home a couple different points. Not only the frosts that have destroyed almost all the fruit, again, and vegetable that's being grown in Europe, but the labor shortages. See, the thing that's coming up that's not being featured in the news very much here is China's planting is so far behind that I would call them a no plant 2020. They're experiencing fertilizer and potash. What else do they? Pesticides and herbicides. They're having difficulty even getting these to the local farmers inside China. There's been a second lockdown going on right in the middle of what are be considered our Kansas grow area, right in the middle of the heartland of their corn and wheat area. The no planting going on, and the locusts are coming over, and they finally have come through Myanmar over into Western China. That's going to be something to contend with. Europe's in a no plant, plus they just had the mega freeze. And the U.S., the flooding, the spring 2020 forecast out, delayed planting again. So it's just kind of reiterate when Spanish and German, and who else was that? Italian farmers talking about shortages of vegetables and food and fruit over there. And then we see Natural News picking up, talking about the Canadian shortages coming, and then what we're talking about here inside the United States, plus what's being widely reported in China. Like, you got to take a serious look that something is not right, and the information of you getting more self-sufficient for some reason is still being hidden. Like, if I was a congressperson, I would be screaming at the top of my lungs to everybody in my state, get a garden going right now. And, you give out an enormous amount of information on how to contact the co-ops, because this is the perfect time to do it. Not only is the moon phase coming in for, nice planting again next week, but you could get a bunch of trees and different types of things from these co-ops and learn a little bit more about your local area. But nobody wants to talk about this.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that super chat saying gardeners say you shouldn't do too much so you don't get overwhelmed. I would actually agree with that in general, and that's why I've been putting a lot of emphasis on those calorie crops, potato, squash, especially squash, winter squash that can keep throughout a long winter, and Jerusalem artichokes will stay in the ground. These things, you dig them up when you need them. They're like, it's money in the bank, except we're talking about food in the ground that you're waiting until you need it. And they're all prolific too, right? So one little sunchoke you can cut up into a ton of little tubers that'll take over. Some people consider it invasive. So I just wanted to mention that you can do that. You can focus on a few things so that you nail them, and you can actually have good results in terms of caloric, nutritive production, and it's something that's prolific for the rest of your neighborhood. So I just want to throw those things out. Well, I hope you can still hear me. But on your point about wheat, Russia actually just today also suspended their exports of wheat, which is, we've been talking about this for years. Again, it's you're exactly right. Like, all the effects of the Grand Solar Minimum that we've been talking about for years, these crop failures mounting, the eventual now shutdown of international trade, where Russia says we're not going to export wheat, we're going to keep it for ourselves. The UN describes this as crazy nationalist, protectionist policies, and says that could exacerbate global food shortages. But it's just a sensible thing to do, and act on behalf of your people first. And yeah, adding to that, Kansas just lost a lot of wheat this past weekend with the frosts down there, the storms down there, and that's on top of U.S. having the smallest wheat plantings in some time. So all of these problems that we've been discussing and kept an eye on, that was sort of the slow burn, has now just ignited full force with the viral situation. And we can see that the government is clearly, unfortunately, not going to help us in achieving a soft landing from that Grand Solar Minimum drop in crop production. In fact, they are sort of showing their hand completely over these last few weeks in the direction they're moving, with testing the waters with the seed, banning sales of seed, And people can tell that's not, there's no rational reason to keep people from buying seeds. And so it just doesn't make sense. And I think people can smell something wrong with that. And that's helping to push people that weren't necessarily thinking about it before towards growing your own food. And so it's helping us to spread the word in a lot of ways. But yeah, it tells us they're not going to be helping us here. And so it is up to us, and I mean all of us now, to take action, to start growing these things, to arm our neighbors with the seeds and with the tubers, and produce as much food as we can in a decentralized fashion as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's all Britt. Thank you for that. And I would agree, it's going to start with the mind frame first of what we have in terms of local produce coming in a different season that you're going to have to shuffle through. The globalization you alluded to, I think it's over, and we're not going to be getting strawberries and any fruit at any time of the month from any country across the world like we used to, just simply from the amount of non-sales going on, the amount of non-voyages, or they call ghost voyage, where it's a completely empty ship coming back. Blank sail is another term for that, what they call it. So think about, we have to go more back into our grandparents' time. And I've been always talking about the hashtag think like your grandma, because, that's what they did. What our grandparents used to do was when things come in season, they stocked it. Like you're talking about, pumpkins are quite easy to keep, potatoes and that sort of thing. But it's going to be a mind shift first before we move into, canning and dehydrating and storing and making sauces and different kind of tea and herbal tinctures and things, moving with every part of the plant that we can use. It's going to take a full mind shift, and others are going to have to come with you as well, because to do all the work by yourself is kind of unrealistic. You're going to be spending 5 to 6 hours per day just to grow enough food to feed yourself. And then, if you have others around you that just want to sit around, there'll still be food in the store. It's just going to be a full radical mind shift of availability and supplementing what you can grow yourself. So I think, taking this sustainability is going to be a mind step as well, between putting those fingers into the soil,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there. It's a complex set of problems, and so there are different things you can do. And I think growing your own food is part of it. Aligning though with people who are existing ranchers and producers in your area, like I said, they're in many cases used to having one kind of a market, and now they're really quickly needing to move to direct to market sales. And so if you can help them, by purchasing their product, that's great. It's more nutritive than the stuff in the store that's no longer in the stores anyway. But also, like, if you're a webmaster, if you're out of work now, you can go help these people out. And I don't just mean with labor, which they probably need in their operation, but you can hook them up with it. If you're a webmaster with a shopping cart, and bring them into the world of online sales, or offer to, I don't really know. Whatever it is that's in your background that is a unique skill set, there's a ton of needs for us, like I said, to be creating a new system as they tear down the one that's been feeding most people. And all of us have a part to play in that.
Now, thinking about this, Italy had done something called the time bank, where people traded skills. So if you were a doctor, doesn't matter, 1 hour is 1 hour. And people would donate the hour of time for a thing. Okay, I would clean your teeth and you would come and fix my door. So a carpenter and a dentist, of course, would trade 1 hour of time. But, you obviously had to buy they're not going to give you a free door. You'd have to purchase whatever it is or have it, and that person's skill set to then put it together, improve it, or do whatever. 1 hour of time is 1 hour of time. And see, that's a constructive way to try to get everybody's skill set assessed and figure out what people can do in order to help the whole, because not everybody's going to be a farmer. And that's another thing to realize too. Like a carpenter or a blacksmith or somebody or a tech person is not going to absolutely change and go, I'm just going to go straight into plant all the time every day. That's not their thing. That's why they've chosen to do what they've done already. So it's going to be a combined skill set where there's still strengths inside a certain subset of a very specific niche of, again, what you're talking about, a skill. And, starting to talk with people about the skills they have. And, before long, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people talking, then, there's a lot of information and knowledge there. And who do they know? And again, it's going to be more local. It's going to be your neighbors, maybe your friends and family, people you used to work with. But again, they're going to have to be pretty close. You're not going to be able to do this with somebody 50 miles away.
And, it feels good, right? So I already have people. I guess, let me back up to your point that there are a lot of people who are still waiting for the stores to go back to normal, who just think this is going to blow over and then things will go back to normal. And so, yes, there will be those of us who are aware of what's going on are going to have to put in more work right now up front. We're going to have to, if we want this to work out well, if we want to have that soft landing, then it's up to us, like I said, to start growing more food than we can possibly eat or plant or take care of, because I have faith that these people are going to come online. I already have lots of neighbors and friends who are saying, it's actually, they didn't have any interest in a garden before, they were doing whatever it was, but suddenly, and perhaps it has to do with the empty shelves or the government banning seed sales, suddenly they want to have a garden. It sounds really good to them. And I don't mind at all spending time with them or going over to their place and sort of seeing where the sun hits, showing them how to think through where to put things so that they'll grow well, and how to structure the dietary needs of their family, and try and chip away at that with what they can grow really easily. It doesn't necessarily take, in fact, it can't take a huge capital investment at this point in time to get started. But so I think as that goes on, yes, you're right, there will be a significant amount of education that goes on, and that's just going to be an organic thing that filters out. I posted this video of a crystal in a super saturated solution, because when you get the solution super saturated, and then you give it the seed crystal, and it just spreads throughout the medium, and there's no single molecule that's running around coordinating it. It's just a natural thing that falls into place. And I think we have to be aware that right now, and this, you said up front, this is a scary time, and I think people are afraid, not chiefly because of the bioweapon that people are talking about, but because of all the changes and the speed at which they're coming out, and they're grieving for the normalcy and what the ability to anticipate what might happen tomorrow. That's gone now. It's all just like this rolling disaster that keeps changing every day, and there's no chance to catch your breath and find stable footing. And so I think giving people a sense of the need to, I forget where I was going with that, but I think giving people the need to the ability to stand on the surety of investing in the future. When you plant a seed, you're creating that future, and you're starting to imagine that future. And so the speed of change that's happening right now is being used, right, by the powers that be, who never let a crisis go to waste. You better believe they have their agendas ready to go, and they are grafting that structure onto reality, trying to put it in there with all these changes. And that's why we have to be going out right now. This is not a time for staying inside and drinking quarantinis. We have to go outside and start drinking food so that we can inform this new structure, because it's crystallizing whether or not you want it to. And we have to be part of shaping that, or else it'll be their vision. And I don't want to live in the vision they describe.
Speaking of shapes, do you notice that tree over your left shoulder looks like a heart? Is anybody else seeing that in your background there, Christian? Over to your left, there's a heart. The whole tree looks like a heart at the top there, the way the branches are split off. Excellent. And yeah, like, how would you get the conversation started? Because it sounds, as if you've had some good luck with getting the conversation started, and then getting people to listen, and then getting them to go to action. So what did you break in with first? Because I'm sure a lot of people are having this with their relatives. Wherever I look, they're not really arguing, but it's just like one person doesn't believe it's going to get that bad as the next person, or they think it, like you say, it's going to return to something normal, which it's not. We're into a new era. This is a new farming technique, a new management system for Earth has been put in place. If you haven't realized that, it's there. So how do you break through without being offensive, and bring people into the discussion? Because there's so many levels of, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be medium, we're going to go back to normal next week, on May 1st we'll be back to normal. So you got all these ranges here. Any ideas for everybody out there listening?
Well, for me, the conversations that go best are the ones where they've had some time to think about it, and they come back to you and they say, I would like to have a garden, or they just ask some sort of like probing questions, like, hey, how is it that you get the potatoes to grow in a container? And like, I'll sort of like dance at that level for a second, and then at some point I'll break through and like, all right, are you trying to feed your family? Because I think we can have a broader conversation about how you structure your dietary needs, and then start to like target different levels of caloric output out of the space that you have. And I love having those conversations, because to me, it feels like we're bringing more people onto the team. This is more food that's being produced that I don't have to plant and water and keep track of. So it feels like there's just more people coming on the team, and it's awesome.
And one thing over in Asia too, community gardens are very popular, where they're waiting for a building to be built somewhere, and they know it'll be 2 years out. Maybe it's sold, it's slated for development, but nobody's even bid in on it, so it'll be 4 or 5 years out. what they do is they take those areas, and we're talking about an office building or apartment building. It's a pretty large space, you know, over an acre there. That would be the foundation. And they just turn it into a garden, and everybody in the neighborhood comes in and works. And at different times, they know who's there and who's not. I mean, you could come by and pick an apple if you never worked in it, but generally it's all the neighbors around the area putting it together, and it's a community space. But here in the United States or in places in Europe, it's more like somebody's private yard. So again, different ways to think about this and overcome some of what we've already been trained. Like, that's private property, that's mine, that's yours. Why don't we share it all? Like, how willing are the neighbors to share and open up parts of their yards as well? But then we have all this litigation where if you fall and you trip and then somebody, oh, you're on your property, you're going to go sue them. So there's this fine line between, you know, the old world we've been in where there's so much like, don't come across my property, to, hey, let's open it up and all grow food together. And if we did it for 3 yards together or something like that across the front or backyards, you could have an enormous amount of food being grown on multiple properties. It's just, you know, that concept of a community garden getting set in, because here in the States, I don't know where you could just go start plunking down a bunch of seeds for the community without somebody coming by and saying, oh, it's interfering with the zoning laws. Oh, that's somebody's private property over there that was going to build a building. You can't do that. Versus other more, you know, just winging it. If nobody's using the property, we'll let other people use it until it's actually built on. And there's going to be a lot of defaulting. I saw 30% of people did not pay mortgages last month, and rent. Maybe it was 60% mortgage no payment and rent was 30% no pay. But any kind of new development is going to be off the slate for a while. So if there are properties near you that are going to be developed that are just those bare lots, take them over and start growing food on them as a community garden.
Yeah, there was a cool project in Detroit a few years ago, because they sort of were ahead of the rest of us in terms of their demise. But taking some of those empty lots and tearing down the old homes that were in disrepair and starting to grow food on there. And that's, you know, I think that's sort of a nice iconic way of thinking of what we're doing here. There's a lot of stuff that's just been torn down. 1 in 10 Americans just lost their job. You know, they're letting people out of jail. We got to realize that those rules you're talking about, like the liability concerns, we're just gonna have to get over it at this point. Those rules, in a lot of cases, don't apply anymore. That's why they're able to let people out of jail. And I mean, they are breaking all the rules already, because, like I said, they are imposing this new, gradually totalitarian system on everyone. And it's a really weird way that they're going about it. Just sort of a piece at a time. It's like they've got food on your plate that you come down to every night, but like each night there's like a little bit less. And they're like, oh, it'll be back tomorrow, and you're back tomorrow, but there's a little bit less. And like, yeah, sorry, we had this hang up. It'll all be fine tomorrow. It's like this, they keep sort of chipping away. It's a very sociopathic approach to the liberties and the economy and all these things being whittled away. But yeah, we got to realize that those rules aren't applying anymore, and that's what's enabling them to come and just break everything. And so we can't play necessarily by a lot of those things that we're keeping, like guerrilla gardening. I mean, we should all be just planting seeds. Like I said, planting seeds where we can and where they'll grow is, I think it's totally on the table now. If you want to call that civil disobedience, then baby, I'm all for it. Guerrilla gardening is absolutely something that I think we should be considering right now, doing right now, in fact.